that is not specifically authorized by policy, he or she has to, or they, have to inform the school board promptly of such action and the need for policy.
Mm-hmm.
So it assumes that there does need to be a policy to cover that.
Yes. In talking through this with Dr. Noonan, we were looking at the current policies that we have in place and trying to figure out what would come up that we don't have a policy that's already on point. And the only thing that I could come up with is if in an emergency we need to do something drastic and then need to come back and say emergency circumstances allow the superintendent the authority to move students from different schools, or we're trying to figure out what that might be. But as far as hiring of staff and making sure students are safe, and we have a lot of policies that already cover those areas. So this is the catch-all for what we don't know in the event something happens and we can't turn to a policy and say, yes, the superintendent clearly has this authority to act right now on behalf of the schools. So I can't do a very good job conceiving of when that would be, but I do think it's important to have here, just not knowing what might come up. I do get your point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I would go at it in a slightly different way.
Sure.
And it seems as if the default is going to be beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. Mm-hmm. If there's no policy. And some of this I'm thinking, so does every time the superintendent, does every time he or she or they do something, they have to say, "What am I acting pursuant to a policy?" Because, and I would think there are some normal statutorily defined executive rights of the superintendent that don't have to be based in policy. And then the second thing is, if there is no policy and the superintendent needs to do something, there might be time to ask the board before acting. Mm-hmm. That's not contemplated here. And here the decisions are subject to review. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean reversal. Mm-hmm. So I can see there could be a gap, having a little bit of trouble figuring out when or where that would be. Mm-hmm. But this seems to be another example of there's room for growth in this language, I would say. Mm-hmm. And figuring out exactly what it is we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it.
To your point of, do we always look to see if there's a policy on point? We often do. I have principals and administrators come to me on a regular basis saying, what is our policy on this, or how does policy govern these actions? So we are looking at the policies often, which is one of the major reasons to get them updated quickly, and make sure that they're all aligned and they relate to each other. The board did adopt policy CBA on the duties of the superintendent, and that is fairly extensive as what the specific duties of the superintendent are. So in my mind, this policy, BFE CHD, would cover things that would come up where there's not a clear direction or directive to the superintendent that this falls within his or her duties.
I'm wondering if we could have an offline about this before second reading and give you some further thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that okay with everyone else? Okay.
All right, and we only have one more policy. This is policy CH. It was previously titled by the VSBA as policy implementation. And it had started off talking about development of regulations and then talked about dissemination of policies and regulations. I've proposed moving the dissemination of policy regulations to the top, since we are stating that it's incumbent upon administrators and supervisors for informing staff members of newly adopted and revised policies. And I'm recommending that rather than be called policy implementation, since it talks about the dissemination of policies and regulations, that be the title. And then this also would make clear what it is we've discussed through a number of policies, that the development of regulations is within the authority of the superintendent. Any questions about policy CH? Or? All right, thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions on these policies, I would seek a motion to approve first reading of the policies discussed, with an understanding that we will continue to discuss policy BFE.
Madam Chair, I move that the school board approve first reading of the following policies. Policy IKF, the Virginia Assessment Program and Graduation Requirement. IKEB, Acceleration. IAA, Notification of Learning Objectives. IKH, Retaking SOL Assessments. IGAH, Family Life Education, FLE. BFC, Policy Adoption. BF, Board Policy Manual. Are we also going to approve BFE? Okay, yeah. BFE, Administration and Policy Absence. CH, Policy Dissemination and Regulation Development.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Liddon. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Great. We will now move on to 9.01, our future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items they'd like to discuss or add to their agendas? Seeing none, we'll move on to 10.01, the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick updates. Some of them I mentioned earlier, but I'll just for purposes of reiteration, the first 12 minutes training has been going on with our elementary staff. In the midst of the training with our police department, we've been working with the adults, and I want to be really clear with the board and with the community that at the elementary school level that it is the adults that are trained, but the students aren't trained. So they are not exposed to that first 12 minutes training, but our teachers are. We work with them on how to engage in case of a crisis situation. I want to wish our students at Jessie Thackeray good luck on Friday. They have their first field trip ever, and they're going to Burke Nursery for the fall festivities there, and that should be a lot of fun. This Thursday at Mount Daniel will be back to school night, and hopefully those of you that have family there can head over. This is the final back to school night of the season, and will be the most people at Mount Daniel ever since we've moved to second grade over there. We are reminding parents to please take the shuttle bus and respect our neighbors on Oak Street, please. The annual initiative by our counseling department of kindness, respect, and behavior is working through all the classrooms and are being visited by Mr. Jackson, and Ms. Gradle is visiting her annual lessons on preventing the spread of germs with our kindergartners as well. So it's a good reminder at this time of year to not spread germs. Thomas Jefferson, a shift in the schedule this year that alternate weeks for library time and tech time seems to be going fairly well. Students have a chance to get more books out of the library and off for a week. Miss Davis in the library has over 100 new titles on the shelves, with more coming each month, and is very excited about that. Just some a special shout out to Mr. Buck at Mary Ellen Henderson, our seventh grade civics teacher there, who hosted the U.S. citizenship ceremony last Friday. 18 people were sworn in as citizens, and the whole 7th grade student population participated in the event. It was very meaningful for everyone who was in attendance, the new citizens, their families, our students and teachers, and staff. There were 2 7th graders who were the keynote speakers that day, and if you haven't had a chance to observe their video, it was impressive and very moving what they talked about, because it was their own immigration experience, and very powerful. At George Mason, Spirit Week saw great levels of student population. The LASSO featured a photo essay of some of our theme-dressed students this year. We are actively working on getting students involved in the community beyond academics, as always, and so the Service Learning Fair and Club Fair had great displays for students to look at and be invited, so it kind of goes to that balance that we were talking about earlier. On Monday, October 28th, we will welcome Delegate Simon and Senator Saslaw to our division for a visit, where we'll be touring them through Mary Ellen Henderson and also chatting with them about some of our legislative priorities. And I know Ms. Litton has already begun her work on that. So thank you for that. This last week, we had a really great opportunity that was put on by the Student Health Advisory Committee and Sue Dimmock to talk about vaping and the effects of vaping at George Mason High School. I would say there were about 100 people in attendance, parents and community members, and it was really, I think, well done. And the speaker from Fairfax County did a nice job talking about what to look for when students are vaping. And so I just want to say that it is something that we in the school system take very seriously and are working with our schools on, and sort of happy to report that we are seeing a decline in referrals and issues associated with vaping at the high school level. And my other sample of one says that he's not seeing it as much as he was before either. So I think that there are some educational pieces that seem to be making a difference, and I do think that changing the age to 21 has made a difference as well. And the last thing I want to mention is that there are some updates to the calendar of events regarding the calendar of schools. And so I've asked Mr. Brett to sort of help navigate so that you can see where all of this is. So if you go to our splash page, on the upper right-hand side, you'll see the 2020 school start date. If you click that, from there it will take you to a home page that gives you some information about the start dates that we're talking about, and also has the video of the last work session where we introduced the topic. On the left-hand side, you'll see the meeting calendar. So if you click on that, it will give you all of the dates that are coming up. So you'll see where public comment falls, where the ad hoc committee meetings are, where the community outreach meetings are as well. One night in particular, the first community outreach meeting is coming up October 17th from 6 to 7, and we are limiting that to an hour so that it doesn't interfere with the League of Women Voters event that's also happening at George Mason High School that begins at 7 o'clock. I believe that's the candidates forum, but we've put together a nice plan for that hour so that we can share some information with the community and also garner some feedback with respect to drivers to consider as we think about the calendar going forward. And then the other thing you'll see in here is frequently asked questions. So what goes into the school calendar? What values does it reflect? What are the contract lengths? And some of the things that we talked about at this last school board work session are in here. Range of possibilities and the like. So as questions come up, we will add that to the FAQ so that you all can be comfortable with the idea of making a decision in December that has been well communicated, has been transparent, and the information is up there. So anyway, we look forward to having our first community outreach session next week. And again, that's about an hour long, and we'll be at the Mustang Cafe at 6 o'clock. So that's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan. Next, we have our board and student liaison comments. I will start at this end with Mr. Webb.
Don't have any comments this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
All right, I'll try and keep this short because I've been in a lot of meetings lately. So BIE is doing a fantastic job. Mary Beth Connolly has kicked it off and has a lot of great things that she's working on. But one of the things that they need currently is speakers for the career chats at the high school. And so if you have not gotten her list that she sent out, I think a couple times, regarding the needs that they have, I'd be happy to forward that to you. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Noonan, but I think Matt Hells has included that in his hitching post as well. And I think the PTSA has also had the list out of speakers that they need.
I believe that's right, but I would need to double check to be sure.
Yeah, I know at least one of those two have had it. So the list is out there, and if you need it, let me know. And then just to echo what Dr. Noonan said earlier, because he likes to take my liaison reports with regard to the Health and Wellness Advisory Committee, and kudos to Sue Dimmock for putting that fantastic talk together. Everyone, I think, really appreciated it, had a lot of really great information. I thought the speaker was very relatable and gave us a lot of things to think about. And I think one of the things that I have been thinking about, and I guess I read an article about today, was the need for considering cessation services for the students who are trying to quit vaping. It sounds like there's a lot of kids now are realizing that, not necessarily in our schools, but just in the country, realizing now that they want to quit vaping, and not a lot of cessation services out there that are aimed at kids, and the ones even for quitting tobacco in general aren't quite as effective. So that's something that's still on the horizon in terms of trying to identify cessation services. And my